Hello and welcome to our show 31 Minutes. This is Tuqa Omar from AUCTV Studios. Today's episode covers a variety of topics and public service announcements. We also have our special interview with Professor Tahiyya Abdel Nasser, the Director of Graduate Studies in the Department of English and Comparative Literature here at AUC. Despite having plenty of garbage bins spread across campus, littering is still a problem. The upcoming PSA by Salma Nassar sheds the light on this issue. Breaking the rules can be quite thrilling, especially when smoking. More on this in the upcoming PSA from Mansoura Kamal. According to the World Health Organization, depression and anxiety are the second leading causes of death among people from the age of 15 to 29. The upcoming PSA addresses this issue. In Luxor, there is a charity hospital that was built 20 years ago. It provides a home to thousands of suffering animals. The details with Dalia Ashraf in the upcoming report from Luxor.
Here in Luxor, where drawings on these walls of temples and huge statues show the respect of ancient Egyptians to their animals. They had the faith that animals were their gods, which would protect them after life. However, after thousands of years, you can see different scenes of suffering animals. That's why number of healthcare centers were built for them. 3 miles away of the Temple of Luxor, there is one of them, which is owned by an English woman, Kim. Kim devotes her life to help the animals in Luxor.
We moved in here in 2007. Before that, we had a small rented place. But then we were lucky enough to be able to buy the land. And fortunately, we've been very lucky that people support us because we're a registered charity. And people come and help us with donations so we can run the place. And now we've just bought the piece of land next door as well.
Around 34,000 animals were treated every year. In addition to this free preventative treatment service, which is provided by this rescue center, education classes are presented to children in order to help in raising their awareness of animal welfare.
We had a competition for the local school children that come to us. We have about 50 children a day, 5 days a week during school time. And so we had a competition for all of those children that have been to us over the previous year. And the competition was they had to draw a picture of good behavior and bad behavior.
When you are inside this place, you will feel you are in a big home. Animals welcome their guests, and different species live with each other feeling home and safe. Not only they have their rooms to live in, but also they have places to rest in peace after their death. They find all they need, not only food and health care, but also respect, welfare, and even friendship with humans.
وربنا قال لازم تكون رؤوف بالحيوان وبالإنسان وبكل حاجة. أي مخلوق ربنا خلقه لازم تكون رؤوف بيه، ترحمه برضه.
These kind and beautiful animals communicate with us using their special language to express their feelings. So, realizing these feelings is part of our humanity and civilization. And we should back to our ancestors to learn and understand the real meaning of respecting these creatures. Dalia Ashraf, AUCTV.
Focusing on your ability rather than your disability is a key to success in life. More on this in the upcoming PSA by Daniel Moore. Welcome back. Our guest today is an expert in contemporary literature, cultural encounters, and finding new fields of research in the literature of the 20th and the 21st centuries. Please welcome with us Dr. Tahiyya Abdel Nasser, the Associate Professor of English Comparative Literature and the Director of Graduate Studies at the American University in Cairo. Hello, Professor Tahiyya.
Hello.
Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Both of your graduate and undergraduate studies were in English and comparative literature, and now you are teaching it.
Yes.
What made you so deeply interested in this field?
I've always been very interested in literature, and I've always wanted to study it, and I've been interested in cultures, societies, languages, and literature. And I've focused on comparative literature also in my scholarship and in my teaching. And I'm interested in drawing out connections between different cultures.
What is the thing that you find interesting about it?
It's a passion. It's I love to read books and I love to write, and I also, love the critical analysis and the creativity and that it involves, and I love teaching it. And yes.
How did it add to your personality?
I've always loved it and been very passionate about it, and I think it's part of my personality, and it's part of who I am. And I'm also interested in the way it opens up doors to other cultures and other people and connections and encounters.
How did literature affect in the cultural exchange between the East and West?
When we teach and study comparative literature, we typically would focus on East-West relations, and I was trained in comparative literature. I focused on European, on Arabic, on post-colonial literature. I also am interested in connections not just between East and West, but also between South and South, and this is the subject of my research and scholarship. And I look at I'm always interested in uncommon frameworks of comparison. So I compare between different cultures that we would not normally.
Which culture had the bigger impact on the other?
I think all cultures have I mean, if you look at East and West, I mean, Arabic literature, for example, has been influenced by European literature, but I like to think also that there is, you know, an influence on the West by the East as well. So it's not just, I mean, I like to think of these connections as being not just, you know, one directional.
Can you give us an example for that influence?
For example, what I'm working on now, I'm working on a book about connections between Arabic and Latin American literature. And while we normally think of the influence of Latin American literature on Arabic literature, I have also come upon instances in which Latin American writers were interested in the Orient and they wrote about it, and they also came to the Arab world, and so it's interesting to see the effect of that also on Latin American literature.
Yeah, and in autobiographies, you also have your book, Literary Autobiography and Arab National Struggles. So
Yes.
how was the effect in the modern Arabic autobiographies?
When I wrote my book, Literary Autobiography and Arab National Struggles, about Arab autobiography in English, Arabic, and French. So it was interesting to see that this is a Western form that was being adopted by Arab writers, but they also drew upon an Arab literary tradition. And also writers were writing in English and in French, and so were influenced by these traditions as well, by Anglophone and Francophone traditions.
And what did the Arab writers add in this type of literature?
I looked at a generation of Arab writers. I looked at, for example, writers like Latifa Zayed from Egypt, Assia Jabbar from Algeria,
and
Radwa Ashur from Egypt, Mahmoud Darwish from Palestine. And I looked at, for example, Mahmoud Darwish wrote poetic autobiography. I looked at how, you know, that form of autobiography in a long poem evolved, and how he drew upon many different traditions in his poems, long poems.
How can this type of literature affect our understanding of history?
The autobiography?
Yes.
Autobiography is a very unique genre because it focuses on the writer's own life story, and I was interested in these works in writers who were involved, had a deep public involvement, but they also wrote autobiographies that were very much about the private life, the story, and not just the public collective story, and they also included the historical and
Yes.
how that intersected with
their personal lives.
personal life in a book.
So what can the modern writers learn from those autobiographies?
These autobiographies are very much canonical, and they're written very beautifully. They're written very beautifully. They're beloved. I think we can learn about the different traditions that they drew upon. We can learn about history and also about these very unique lives, and an overarching Arab culture to which all these autobiographical works belong.
It's usually said that it's better to read a book in its original text.
Yes.
Is this statement true?
We can appreciate the beauty of a text in the original language, but I also do not wish to discount translation and all these translated works. So I think we can appreciate also works in translation if we don't have access to them. And for these for literary autobiography, my book, of course, I've had to go back to the original, and I make reference to the original and also to the translations. Translations can be very beautiful. I think it was Garcia Marquez Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the very famous Colombian author, who said that the English translation of 100 Years of Solitude read much better than the original. I mean, he said that, but I think, I mean, it's always a privilege if we can read the text in its original,
Yes.
but I think we can also appreciate it in translation.
So what's the effect of translation on the content of the original from your point of view?
From my point of view, I mean, we can transfer meaning of the original. We may transfer the essence of a text, but of course, I mean, there are some elements of a text that may be lost in translation, like the style, like the nuances, you know, the layers of meaning. But there are many texts that we can read in English that, you know, read very well, that, you know, they're poetic, eloquent. I think we may lose the nuances, maybe the style, but we can have the essence, the spirit, I think, of the original.
Yeah, and I think they also helped in the cultural exchange and having cultural ties between.
Of course, yes, because otherwise, you know, how would, for example, you know, someone from you know, Europe who does not have the language, the Arabic language, be able to read Naguib Mahfouz? How would, you know, an Arab writer who doesn't, you know, necessarily read Spanish be able to read Gabriel Garcia Marquez? So I think it's, I mean, it helps in these, you know, exchanges and.
Yeah, moving to Arabic literature,
yes.
Writers are now moving more towards simplifying the language they use in their books, and they sometimes use slang. What's your opinion about that?
I'm all for colloquial Egyptian language because I think it captures, you know, the essence of an experience, and we have, I think, a gap between spoken and literary
Yes.
Arabic, and it doesn't often, you know, translate a lived moment or experience. So I'm in favor of, I mean, colloquial Egyptian or Arabic if it, you know, I mean, it's necessary, of course.
Yeah.
To
So
relay the
how can we
experience.
limit this gap to encourage more young people to read?
I would love for people to read, to appreciate, you know, the beauty of the language, and I would love, you know, for books to focus, you know, for authors to focus on style and language. I think if it's, I mean, people will read if the story draws them in, if the language is beautiful, and if it also captures, you know, their hopes and desires.
To grab your students' attention at their first day of class, what is the topic that you open with them?
Okay, I would have to ask my students if, you know, if they're interested on the first day of class. I would talk generally about the course. I think I, you know, choose topics that interest students. So I teach contemporary literature, third world literature. So I would, you know, raise some issues related to the course topic. I teach also a course on Arabic and Latin American literature. And students, I think students, you know, they also love Arabic literature, you know, because we teach it in translation in my department, because I think, you know, they can relate to it. They also love Russian literature. So,
Why is that?
I mean, who doesn't? I mean, who wouldn't love Russian literature? So, I mean, it's a very beautiful and rich canon, and they're very interested in that as well.
Yeah, and how are the students different now from before?
I think it changes. I think this generation is very smart. I think it's very different from, you know, other generations. I think students have a lot of resources that other generations didn't have. And they're also very technologically knowledgeable. And I think, you know, they're very privileged, yeah.
Speaking about technology, do you think that ebooks are adding to literature? And
of course, I think it's much easier now and much simpler than it was in the past. So I think an ebook, you can just, I mean, I'm amazed at how easy and simple it is if you wish to, purchase a book, an e-book, it's immediate. So I think it facilitates, the movement of knowledge. And so, I mean, I'm not, a fan of e-books, but I think it's very practical and useful. Yeah.
Apart from your career, you are the granddaughter of the late Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser. How did this affect you while growing up?
Okay. It's a responsibility, and I'm always very conscious of the history, and it's a responsibility that you bear. And
you edited your grandmother's memoir about him.
Yes.
What is the part that you find interesting the most about his life?
I found it so interesting because I had never read the memoir before I actually began to edit before it came out, before it was published. I had not read it. It was in the family collection. And then when it came out in Arabic, I read it. And for me, it was, very new. Some of the information was unknown to me. Of course,
like what?
A lot about the private life, because I think you grow up knowing all the history, all the politics. But of course, because I didn't see,
you didn't see him,
my grandfather. So it was very, just to know, to have this first-hand account, and it was, and I loved the love and beauty and simplicity of it. And of course, when I edited the translation, there was so much, my grandmother's, reminiscences, my father's, they must have filtered into my editing of the translation. So that's what I, knew, but so much I think about the private life.
Do you have any future plans to write anything else about him and his history?
I'm not sure. It would be, we'll see. It would be interesting.
Because he also,
because I think I'm far removed from it, but I'm also, from events, but also very close.
Yes.
So it's interesting to think about that.
And he liked literature as well.
He loved, yes, I know, he loved literature, and he wrote a short story when he was in high school. And I always come upon, his favorite authors, and I also had access to his library where I found, Taha Hussein's Al-Ayyam, The Days. So I'm interested in his literary also interests.
Thank you so much, Professor Tahiyya.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for watching. Our guest today was Professor Tahiyya Abdel Nasser, the Associate Professor of English and Comparative Literature and the Director of Graduate Studies at the American University in Cairo. We talked about literature and its effect on our culture and the history, and also about her grandfather, the late President Gamal Abdel Nasser. Thank you all for watching, and see you next week.